Poor student tutors, struggling classmate, not realizing she's a genius who will revolutionize science. This was the story of Eli Martinez's life, though he wouldn't comprehend its significance until much later. For now, the 21-year-old physics major was simply trying to survive another winter at Westlake University, with threadbare gloves and a scholarship that covered tuition, but little else. The January wind cut through his worn jacket as Eli hurried across the snow-dusted campus quad. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air, each exhale a testament to his determination. 3 jobs, full-time classes, and now these tutoring sessions at the Academic Support Center. But the extra $12 an hour meant he could finally fix the broken heater in his studio apartment. Clutching his battered textbooks closer to his chest, Eli pushed through the glass doors of the science building, the sudden warmth making his chapped face sting. He was 10 minutes early for his first session with a new student, someone struggling in advanced theoretical physics, according to the center coordinator. He found study room B empty and meticulously arranged his notes and reference materials on the small table. Order was something he could control, unlike so much else in his life. The whiteboard markers were nearly dried out, but he'd brought his own, always prepared, always ready to work twice as hard as everyone else. The door creaked open at exactly 4 p.m. "You must be Eli." The voice was soft but steady. Eli looked up to see a young woman with untamed dark curls partially covered by a knitted beanie. Her oversized gray sweater seemed to swallow her slender frame, and she clutched a notebook with equations scribbled across the cover. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, which were an unusual amber color that caught the fluorescent light. "That's me," Eli said, extending his hand. "And you're Mira Patel?" Her handshake was brief, her fingers ice cold despite the building's warmth. "Thanks for doing this. I know it's late in the semester." There was something in the way she carried herself, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes darting around the room, never quite meeting his, that spoke of someone accustomed to making herself smaller, less noticeable. Eli recognized it because he'd spent years doing the same. "No problem. Professor Harlow's class is notoriously difficult," Eli said, gesturing for her to sit. "What parts are giving you trouble?" Mira placed her notebook on the table, revealing pages dense with equations. Not the neat, methodical work Eli expected from a student, but chaotic spirals of numbers and symbols that spilled across margins and continued upside down along edges. "Everything," she said, a flicker of something, shame, frustration, crossing her face. "I can't seem to get through the assignments." Eli nodded sympathetically. He'd felt overwhelmed countless times during his first years at Westlake, before his mother got sick, before the medical bills consumed their modest savings, before he'd learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep and vending machine dinners. "Let's start with the basics then," he said, flipping open the textbook. "What's your background in physics?" "Just the introductory courses," Mira murmured, her gaze fixed on her hands. The knuckles were red and chapped, her nails bitten to the quick. For the next hour, Eli walked her through fundamental concepts, surprised by how quickly she absorbed the information. For someone supposedly struggling, she asked remarkably insightful questions. Occasionally, she'd start to say something, then catch herself and go quiet again. When the session ended, Mira gathered her things with hurried movements. "Same time Thursday?" she asked, already halfway to the door. "Sure," Eli said, watching as she disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind the faint scent of coffee and graphite pencils. Something about Mira Patel didn't add up, but Eli had no time to dwell on it. His shift at the campus cafe started in 20 minutes, and after that, he had his own homework to tackle. The life of a poor student left little room for curiosity about others. Thursday's session followed a similar pattern, except this time, Mira arrived with a coffee for him, black with 1 sugar, somehow exactly how he liked it. "You looked tired last time," she explained with a small shrug. "I noticed things." The gesture caught Eli off guard. Few people noticed him at all, let alone with such precision. "Thanks," he said, the warmth of the cup seeping into his perpetually cold fingers. "That's really thoughtful." As they worked through problem sets, Eli began to notice peculiarities in Mira's approach. She'd occasionally write down solutions that weren't taught in class, different pathways to the same answer, often more elegant than the textbook methods. When he asked about them, she'd blink rapidly and mutter something about just guessing or trying random things. By their third session, Eli's curiosity had evolved into suspicion. While Mira stumbled over basic concepts when directly questioned, her notebook contained derivations that even graduate students would struggle with. Once, when she thought he wasn't looking, she quickly erased an equation that Eli recognized from cutting-edge research papers. work beyond what any undergraduate should know. Mira, he finally asked during their fourth meeting, why are you really here? The question hung in the air between them. Outside, snow began to fall, soft flakes illuminated by the campus lamps. She stared at him for a long moment, her amber eyes suddenly sharp and assessing. Then her shoulders slumped. Professor Harlow said I need to learn to explain my work properly. That my methods are, she twisted a strand of hair around her finger, unconventional. He said if I can't demonstrate the standard approaches on exams, he'll fail me, no matter if my answers are right. Eli leaned back in his chair, processing this revelation. So you don't actually need help understanding the material? No, she admitted quietly. I need help pretending I learned it the same way as everyone else. The honesty in her voice struck Eli. How many times had he hidden his own circumstances, pretended everything was fine when it wasn't? How many nights had he studied by the light of his phone because he couldn't afford to pay the electric bill that month? Show me, he said. What? Show me how you really work. Hesitantly, Mira flipped to a blank page in her notebook. Her hand hovered over the paper for a moment, then began to move with startling confidence. Equations flowed from her pencil in an intricate dance, branching and connecting in patterns Eli had never seen before. She worked silently, intensely focused, occasionally muttering under her breath in what sounded like a mixture of English and mathematical terms she'd invented herself. 15 minutes later, she had derived a solution to a problem that had stumped Eli's graduate-level study group for weeks. Eli searched for words. That's not just unconventional, Mira. That's revolutionary. She flinched at the word, quickly closing her notebook. It's just how my brain works. But it doesn't matter if I can't pass Harlow's class. Why are you hiding this? Eli asked, genuinely bewildered. Do you realize what you could do with this kind of insight? Mira's laugh was brittle. You mean besides being treated like a freak? Or having my work stolen by professors looking to advance their careers? Or being pushed into research I don't want to do? She shook her head. I've been down that road before. The bitterness in her voice revealed old wounds. Eli recognized the defensive posture, the wariness of someone who'd learned the hard way that being exceptional could be as much a curse as a blessing. I'm sorry, he said simply. That shouldn't have happened to you. Something in his tone made her look up, really look at him for perhaps the first time. You're not going to tell anyone? Not my secret to tell, Eli replied. He hesitated, then added, but I think you're making a mistake hiding your talent. The world needs minds like yours. The world hasn't exactly been kind to minds like mine, she countered, but her voice had softened. As they packed up, an understanding formed between them, unspoken but palpable. Eli would help Mira navigate the academic system that demanded conformity, and in return, she would share her unique perspective with him. What began as tutoring sessions gradually transformed into something more complex. Twice a week, they would meet in study room B. For the first hour, Eli would teach Mira the conventional approaches to physics problems, the methods Professor Harlow expected. For the second hour, their roles reversed, and Mira would tentatively share her intuitive understanding of the universe. Winter deepened around them, the campus buried under layers of snow and ice. Inside their small study room, a different kind of thawing was occurring. Eli learned that Mira lived alone in an off-campus apartment, nearly as spartanly furnished as his own. Her scholarship covered only partial tuition, leaving her to work nights at a 24-hour diner to make up the difference. She drank excessive amounts of coffee, slept irregularly, and had a habit of forgetting to eat when deep in thought, sometimes for an entire day. One evening in early February, Eli arrived at their session to find Mira asleep at the table, her face pressed against an open textbook. Dark smudges beneath her eyes testified to exhaustion beyond normal student fatigue. Without waking her, he placed his own jacket, threadbare but warm, over her shoulders and quietly began reviewing his notes. She stirred 20 minutes later, momentarily disoriented. I'm sorry, she mumbled, straightening up. Double shift yesterday. No worries, Eli said, sliding a paper cup toward her. Got you tea. Figured you'd had enough coffee already. Mira blinked at the unexpected kindness, her fingers curling around the warm cup. Thanks, she said, her voice thick. You didn't have to. Consider it repayment for all the coffee you brought me. They worked quietly that day, the usual intensity of their sessions softened by mutual understanding. As they were leaving, Mira suddenly asked, Why are you doing this, Eli? The extra hour, I mean. You're not getting paid for it. The question caught him off guard. Why was he staying? The practical part of him knew he should be working those hours at the cafe or taking on another tutoring student. Yet twice a week, he found himself lingering in that study room, watching Mira's mind work in ways that defied conventional understanding. "I guess I'm learning as much from you as you are from me," he answered honestly. Her smile, rare and genuine, warmed something inside him that had been cold for a very long time. The following week brought a fierce snowstorm that shut down most of the campus. Classes were canceled, but neither Eli nor Mira had received the notification. They arrived at the nearly deserted science building, soaked and shivering, only to find a note on the door that the heating system was running at minimum capacity due to the weather emergency. "We could reschedule," Eli suggested, stomping snow from his boots. Mira shook her head, determination glinting in her eyes. "I have an exam next week. We can work with coats on." Study room B was freezing, their breath visible in the air. They huddled at the table, textbooks open between them, shoulders almost touching as they leaned in to preserve warmth. "This isn't working," Eli admitted after 20 minutes of trying to write with numb fingers. Mira chewed her lip thoughtfully. "My apartment is close. We could go there?" The suggestion hung between them, a shift in their carefully maintained boundaries. Until now, they had existed solely within the neutral territory of Study Room B. "Only if you're comfortable with that," Eli said. Mira's apartment was indeed close, a 10-minute trudge through snow-clogged sidewalks. The small one-bedroom was Spartan but meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined every available wall, filled with texts on physics, mathematics, astronomy, and to Eli's surprise, poetry. "Emily Dickinson?" he asked, noticing a well-worn collection. "She understood isolation," Mira said simply, hanging their wet coats by the radiator. "And she saw patterns in everything, just like I do." The apartment was warm, the scent of cinnamon and paper filling the space. Eli noticed there were no photos, no personal mementos beyond the books. It reminded him of his own place, functional rather than homey, a space to exist rather than live. "Tea?" Mira offered, already filling an electric kettle. "Sure." Eli stood awkwardly in the center of the room, suddenly aware that this was the first time he'd been invited into someone's home in over a year. They settled at her small kitchen table, steaming mugs between them, and tried to resume their usual routine. But something had changed. Outside the formal constraints of the tutoring center, conversation flowed more naturally. "How did you end up at Westlake?" Eli asked during a break. Mira stared into her tea. "It was the only school that would accept me without recommendation letters. I find that hard to believe with your abilities. My high school experience was complicated." Her fingers tightened around her mug. "I tested out early, but there were issues with the administration. They thought I was cheating. Were you?" "No." Her voice was flat. "I just couldn't show my work the way they wanted. Sound familiar?" Eli nodded, understanding dawning. "And no one believed you?" "My parents did, but they're both working-class immigrants without college degrees. Their support didn't carry much weight against the school board." She took a sip of tea. What about you?" "Why Westlake?" "Scholarship," Eli said. "Full tuition, close enough to home that I could visit my mom on weekends." "Good?" Eli rarely spoke about his mother's death. It remained a raw wound, one he kept carefully bandaged with work and study. But something about Mira's direct gaze made the words come easier. "She had cancer. Died during my sophomore year." He swallowed hard. "The medical bills took everything we had, even with insurance. That's why I work so much." Mira didn't offer platitudes or force sympathy. Instead, she reached across the table and briefly touched his hand, a gesture so unexpected that Eli felt his throat tighten. "Is that why you're tutoring? For the money?" she asked. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because someone did the same for me once. Professor Chen in my first year. I was struggling with calculus, working 3 jobs, barely sleeping. He spent hours helping me catch up. Never made me feel stupid for not understanding." Eli smiled at the memory. "Said the world needed more scientists from backgrounds like mine. That different perspectives lead to breakthroughs." "He was right," Mira said softly. The storm outside intensified, wind howling against the windows. Neither suggested ending their session early. As evening fell, they moved to Mira's small living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with papers spread around them. Theoretical physics gave way to broader conversations about the universe, about perception and reality, about what it meant to see patterns others missed. "Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a language no one else understands," Mira confessed, her guard lowered by the intimacy of the storm-darkened room. "Like I'm trying to describe colors to someone who's only ever seen in black and white." "Show me," Eli said, echoing his words from weeks earlier. "Try to help me see what you see." Mira hesitated, then reached for a fresh notebook. Close your eyes, she instructed. Eli complied, feeling slightly foolish but curious. Imagine a point of light. Her voice came softly. Now imagine it's not just a point, but a gateway. Beyond it is everything, all of existence folded into patterns. Some are obvious, like the golden ratio in a nautilus shell. Others are hidden, connecting things that seem completely separate. As she spoke, Eli felt her hand take his. She guided his finger to the paper, moving it in sweeping patterns. This is how I see quantum entanglement, she continued. Not as separate particles influencing each other across space, but as a single entity existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The mathematics we use is just approximation. The reality is more beautiful and stranger than our equations can capture. Eli opened his eyes to see what they'd drawn together. An intricate pattern of intersecting lines and curves that somehow made intuitive sense despite defying conventional notation. I think I almost understand, he said, studying the drawing. It's like music versus sheet music. The notation isn't the thing itself. Mira's face lit up with such genuine delight that Eli felt his chest tighten. Yes, exactly like that. The universe is playing this incredible symphony, and we're all just trying to write down the notes we can hear. They talked until midnight, the storm still raging outside, creating a pocket of time that seemed separate from the rest of their lives. When Eli finally checked his phone, he was startled by the hour. I should go, he said reluctantly. Early shift tomorrow. Mira glanced out the window at the blizzard conditions. You can't go out in that. Stay. At his hesitation, she added, the couch is comfortable. I have extra blankets. The offer was practical, not presumptuous, but it represented another boundary crossed. Eli thought about his empty apartment, the broken heater, the perpetual chill that seemed to have seeped into his bones over the past 2 years. If you're sure it's no trouble, he said. It's not, she replied, already gathering blankets from a closet. It's actually nice. Having someone here, that night, lying on Mira's surprisingly comfortable couch, listening to the storm and the occasional creak of floorboards as she moved around her bedroom. Eli realized how profoundly lonely he'd been, not just since his mother died, but perhaps his entire life. Always the scholarship kid, always working while others socialized, always different in ways that mattered. In Mira, he recognized a kindred spirit, someone who understood isolation not as a temporary state, but as a fundamental aspect of existence. The blizzard marked a turning point. Their tutoring sessions expanded beyond physics into broader territories of thought and experience. They began meeting outside the academic support center, at the library, at coffee shops, at a quiet corner of the park once the snow began to melt. Eli learned that Mira had grown up in a small apartment above her parents' convenience store in Queens, spending nights solving complex mathematical problems by flashlight while her family slept. That she'd taught herself calculus at 12 from discarded textbooks. That she'd never had a friend who truly understood how her mind worked. In turn, he told her about growing up in rural Pennsylvania, about his mother who'd worked double shifts at a hospital laundry to support them after his father left, about his determination to become the first in his family to earn a college degree. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, something deeper than friendship developed between them, a connection forged through mutual recognition and respect. In early March, Professor Harlow returned Mira's midterm exam with a grudging A- and a note requesting to see her during office hours. She showed the paper to Eli with a mixture of triumph and anxiety. What do you think he wants? She asked, fidgeting with her pen. Eli shrugged. Probably to ask about your approach. That last problem was supposed to be impossible to solve completely. It was just to see how we'd tackle it. But I did solve it, using the standard methods like you taught me. Yeah, but you also added that elegant proof in the margin. I'm guessing that caught his attention. Mira's meeting with Harlow lasted over an hour. She emerged from his office looking stunned, her cheeks flushed with color. He wants me to join his research group, she told Eli when they met later at their favorite coffee shop. Said my work shows unexpected promise. The last words were delivered with a touch of sarcasm. That's great, isn't it? Eli asked, stirring his coffee. Harlow's group is prestigious. Gets major funding. Mira stared out the window, conflict evident on her face. He wants me to work on a specific project. Military applications. She turned back to Eli, her expression troubled. I don't want my ideas used that way. Did you tell him that? I tried. He said beggars can't be choosers, and students on partial scholarships should be grateful for any opportunity. Anger flashed through Eli. He actually said that to you? Mira nodded, her fingers nervously shredding a napkin. I don't know what to do. If I refuse, he could make things difficult for me. If I accept, she trailed off. You'd be compromising your principles. Eli finished for her. Something like that. She agreed quietly. Eli watched her for a moment, thinking. What if there was another option? Someone else who might recognize your talent without trying to exploit it? Like who? Professor Chen, the one who helped me my first year. He's doing theoretical work on quantum computing now. No military connections. Hope flickered across Mira's face. Do you think he'd talk to me? I know he would, Eli said with confidence. He's always looking for unique perspectives. The meeting with Professor Chen exceeded all expectations. Within minutes of reviewing Mira's work, the older professor was asking questions that pushed even her remarkable mind. By the end of the hour, he had offered her a position in his research group and suggested she consider applying to the university's accelerated PhD program. Your approach to quantum entanglement is unlike anything I've seen, Chen told her, his eyes alight with intellectual excitement. It could potentially resolve several theoretical roadblocks we've been facing. For the first time since Eli had known her, Mira spoke about her ideas without hesitation or fear, her hands gesturing animatedly as she explained concepts that pushed the boundaries of current understanding. The transformation was remarkable, like watching a flower suddenly bloom after a long winter. As they left Chen's office, Mira impulsively hugged Eli, her slender frame trembling with emotion. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. No one's ever believed in me like this before. The warmth of her against him, the scent of her hair, the rare display of uninhibited joy, it all coalesced into a moment of perfect clarity for Eli. He was falling in love with Mira Patel, with her brilliant mind and wounded heart, with the way she saw the world as a symphony of interconnected patterns. Spring arrived on campus, bringing with it a sense of renewal. Trees that had stood barren against winter skies now burst with pale green buds. Students emerged from hibernation, studying on sun-warmed lawns and congregating on the quad. For Eli and Mira, the changing season brought transformation of a different kind. Their official tutoring sessions had ended with Mira's A in Harlow's class, but they continued to meet almost daily. Sometimes they worked side by side, Eli on his senior thesis, Mira on her research with Professor Chen. Other times they simply talked, walked, existed together in a world that had long made both of them feel like outsiders. One evening in late April, they sat on the roof of Mira's apartment building, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. A comfortable silence had settled between them, the kind that comes only with complete acceptance. I submitted my preliminary findings to the International Journal of Quantum Physics, Mira said suddenly. Professor Chen helped with the formatting. Eli turned to her, genuinely delighted. Mira, that's amazing. When did this happen? Last week. She tucked a curl behind her ear, a small smile playing at her lips. I wanted to wait until I heard back before telling you, but Chen says it's practically guaranteed to be accepted. The peer reviewers are apparently extremely enthusiastic. Of course they are, Eli said. Your work is revolutionary. The word hung between them, echoing Eli's assessment from months ago in study room B. This time Mira didn't flinch from it. It feels strange, she admitted. Going from hiding how I think to potentially having my name in journals, from being the weird girl who couldn't explain her answers to whatever this is becoming. It's becoming what it always should have been. Eli said softly, your brilliance being recognized, your voice being heard. Mira turned to face him fully, the setting sun gilding her face with golden light. None of this would have happened without you, Eli. You know that, right? He shook his head. I just helped you navigate the system. The genius was always yours. It wasn't just that. Her voice grew more intense. You were the first person who ever asked me to show you how I really think. Not to change it or fix it or make it more comprehensible to others. Just to understand it. To see me. The weight of her words settled between them, heavy with implication. Eli reached out, tentatively tucking a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I see you, Mira, he said simply. I always have. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When they opened again, they held a certainty that mirrored his own growing realization. I think I'm in love with you, she whispered, the words carried on the evening breeze. Is that okay? Eli felt something inside him finally thaw completely. The last vestige of the isolation he'd carried for so long. More than okay, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Because I'm pretty sure I'm in love with you too. Their first kiss was gentle, hesitant, Two people accustomed to caution, testing the boundaries of newfound vulnerability. Their second was deeper, an affirmation of everything unspoken between them over the past months. When they pulled apart, Mira rested her forehead against his, their breath mingling in the cooling evening air. "What happens now?" she asked. Eli smiled, threading his fingers through hers. "I don't know exactly, but I think it involves more of this. More of us figuring things out together." "I like that plan," she said, returning his smile. "Very scientific. Observe, hypothesize, experiment, and revise as necessary," he added, pulling her closer. They stayed on the roof until stars appeared overhead, talking about possibilities neither had dared imagine before. Mira's paper would likely cause a stir in the physics community. Chen was already talking about conference presentations, research grants, collaborative projects with other universities. He mentioned MIT might be interested in having you give a guest lecture. Eli said, "That's huge, Mira." She nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. "What about you? You're graduating in a month. Have you decided about graduate school?" Eli had been avoiding this conversation, unsure how to reconcile his academic ambitions with his financial reality. "I was accepted to the master's program here," he said, "but without a full scholarship." "You can't afford it," Mira finished for him. "Not right away. I'm thinking of working for a year or two, saving up. The program will still be here." Mira was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the stars overhead. "What if there was another option?" she finally asked. "Like what?" Chen's research grant includes funding for graduate assistants. He mentioned needing someone with solid practical lab skills to complement the theoretical work. She turned to face him. "That could be you, Eli. You're brilliant at experimental design." The possibility took his breath away. "Are you serious?" "Completely. Chen already thinks highly of you. He was your mentor, remember? And our approaches complement each other perfectly. Your methodical precision, my intuitive leaps." The idea of continuing his education while working alongside Mira on cutting-edge research was almost too perfect to believe. "Would Chen really consider me?" "He already has," Mira said, a smile breaking across her face. "I may have mentioned you were graduating soon and looking at options. He told me to send you to his office tomorrow." Joy bubbled up inside Eli, unexpected and overwhelming. For so long, he had carefully managed his expectations, limited his hopes to what seemed practically achievable. The possibility of pursuing his passion without financial sacrifice felt like a dream. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. Mira squeezed his hand. "Say you'll go talk to him. Say you'll consider staying. Say." She hesitated, vulnerability flickering across her face. "Say we'll figure out the future together." "Together," Eli repeated, the word carrying a promise. "I like the sound of that." As summer approached, change swept through their lives with breathtaking speed. Mira's paper was published to significant acclaim, with several prominent physicists citing her approach as potentially paradigm-shifting. Eli graduated with honors and accepted the research assistant position with Professor Chen's team, beginning his master's studies in the fall. They moved in together, a small but sun-filled apartment halfway between campus and downtown. Their bookshelves merged, physics texts alongside poetry collections, creating a physical manifestation of their intellectual partnership. On a warm evening in late August, they sat on their tiny balcony, sharing a bottle of inexpensive wine to celebrate the official announcement of a major research grant. The funding would allow Chen's team, with Mira as a key theorist and Eli as lead experimental designer, to pursue practical applications of her quantum entanglement theories. "Did you ever imagine this?" Mira asked, her head resting against Eli's shoulder. "A year ago, I mean, that we'd be here." Eli considered the question, thinking back to that first meeting in study room B. Two isolated people, each carrying private burdens, neither expecting anything beyond a transactional relationship. "Never," he admitted. "I was just trying to get through each day, pay the bills, finish my degree." "Me too," Mira said softly. "Just trying to be invisible enough to graduate without anyone noticing I was different." She tilted her face up to his. "I'm glad that failed spectacularly." Eli laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "So am I." "Chen thinks the quantum computing prototype might be ready for testing by next spring," Mira said after a comfortable silence. "If it works, when it works," Eli corrected gently. "When it works," she conceded with a smile. "It could change everything. Computational problems that would take conventional systems centuries could be solved in minutes. Climate modeling, medical research, material science," Eli added. The applications are endless, and no military involvement, Mira said with satisfaction. Chen made sure that was explicit in the grant conditions. They fell silent again, contemplating the future stretching before them, bright with possibility, rich with purpose. You know what I keep thinking about? Eli said eventually. What's that? How many other people like us are out there? Brilliant minds in difficult circumstances. Different ways of thinking that never get recognized because they don't fit the expected pattern. Mira nodded thoughtfully. I think about that too. How close I came to giving up. How many others do give up? Maybe that's something we can change, Eli suggested. Once we're established, create opportunities for students who don't fit the traditional mold. The Mira Patel Fellowship for Unconventional Thinkers? She teased, but her eyes were serious. Has a nice ring to it, Eli agreed. Though I think the Patel-Martinez initiative sounds better, more inclusive. She laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained, so different from the guarded young woman he'd met in the depths of winter. I love you, she said simply, for seeing possibilities I couldn't see myself. I love you too, he replied, for showing me a universe more beautiful and complex than I ever imagined. As darkness fell around them, stars emerging in the velvet sky, Eli reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. A poor student tutoring a struggling classmate, not realizing she was a genius who would revolutionize science. But more than that, two lonely souls finding recognition, acceptance, and love in each other's company. Their story was just beginning, with chapters yet unwritten stretching before them. But whatever challenges came, they would face them as they had faced everything else since that first meeting in Study Room B. Together, finding patterns in the chaos, making sense of a complex universe, one equation, one discovery, one day at a time.